Sup, Nerdmigos? Jive talking Nerd John Norcroft. We've got wife here. She's the one with the face. This face. The one that...
I
no
always
face.
have a face.
Not all the time. So we're talking about making sourdough bread. I'm sorry, we're on subject. We're talking about making sourdough bread because, you know.
Yep. Because
quarantine
we're
bread.
on lockdown, so what else do you do? You either play Animal Crossing or you bake bread, and I am not an Animal Crossing person, so I'm baking bread.
She's a wow person.
It's delicious bread. Shut your face.
I was making fun of not the bread. The bread is fun.
I'm making sourdough bread in a traditional manner with wild yeast. So first
Hold on. Camera 2.
So to...
Hold on. No, I'm totally lying. I'm recording.
Jesus. I don't know why I ever agreed to this.
It's camera 2 time.
This video, this marriage, I don't know.
It's fair.
So to collect wild yeast, you basically just put flour and water into a receptacle. In this case, I used mason jars, and then you leave it outside. You start to notice that it starts to bubble, and the liquid will start to separate as the solids in the flour get lower. You can even see there's little teeny tiny bubbles in here, and you can actually smell it. And when you smell it, it smells yeasty and bready.
Smell this one.
Doesn't that smell good?
Maybe it does.
When you pour out the yeast, you can see that it's like bubbly and it's like doing stuff. That's the yeasties doing their job, pooping out bubbles. So I actually ran 2 different wild yeast pieces. One was sitting on the kitchen counter. That's the one that's in the bowl right now. And then the other one I left outside because we live in a beautiful redwood forest and I wanted to see what yeast from outside the house would taste like versus inside the house. And it's mostly the same, but there are some slight differences.
Okay, so before we move forward, so specifically what are you putting in the mason jar in order to make your starter, to start your starter?
So to start the starter, I started initially with 1/3 cup flour, just regular white flour. That's all I've got right now. So that's what I use. But you can use a variety of different flours and a blend of flours.
I think it's called Caucasian American flour.
I used white flour. So I used 1/3 cup white flour, and I used 1/2 cup of water, and mix those together. So it's slightly more water than flour. A lot of mixes tell you to do 50-50, but I find that it's a little too gloopy for me, and I'll just add additional flour when I bake the bread.
What about covering it? I imagine we don't see any flies. Well, we don't see any flies.
You don't see any, and if you do, they're extra protein.
Yeah.
So I put cheesecloth over my thing, and then I secure it with a mason jar ring, like so, and then it just sits outside like that. If you don't have any cheesecloth, you can use like a mesh screen or a colander.
Maybe a pantyhose.
You could also use pantyhose.
Yeah, we use those a lot in brewing for stuff. So
yeah, you could also use pantyhose. Anything that is a moderately loose weave to allow airflow in and out will be great. Do not cover it with a lid. Do not put plastic wrap on it and poke holes in that. That is how you get a gross, moldy jar of stuff that you throw in the trash and never talk to anyone out again. Because
what about like a t-shirt? Could you use like a t-shirt?
Yeah, I guess
like a jersey shirt material.
You're trying to avoid having bugs that are large enough for you to see and only have microscopic bugs like yeast. I know when you get yeast in a thing from the store, it's in granules and you can see it, but really
those are just chunks of microscope. Okay.
Those are just chunks of yeast.
We're gonna camera 1 again. Okay, so microscopic bugs. You don't want all of them. If it smells bad, throw it away.
If it smells like
tastes
bread,
bad, throw it away. If it makes it feel bad when you eat it, throw it away. Listen,
yes.
You have a series of sensory inputs that will tell you when you're not supposed to fucking eat shit. If your fucking flesh sock is telling you not to eat it, for the love of God, don't fucking eat it. Dude, I'm dead fucking serious on this one. That's how you get sick. don't fucking do it, right? That seems
Yeah.
pretty bloody straightforward here. Now, that being said, so we're doing one inside, one outside. I work at a brewery, which means quarantine chaos aside. I work at a brewery, which means that, like, basically we're going to be sort of selected towards brewer's yeast or some sort of a brewer's yeast. Now, I don't know about any, I'm not a fucking science man.
And he also works in a climate that is different from the one that we live in because he
which
works
means
about
that
an hour
so
away.
You're
So
gonna
that's gonna
you're gonna
taste
bring
different.
yeast in, right? And because we live out in the woods and it's totally like a different climate and stuff like that. So what we're doing here is we're having one inside, just in the window, right, in the picture window, and we're having one outside on the porch or patio or whatever the fuck, right? And then we're blending them together to sort of get like a little bit of funkiness, because you can smell the like difference between the one inside the house and the one outside. It's a very small difference, but you can certainly tell that there is a difference.
Yes. Also, to clarify for all of you at home who are not super familiar with this, sourdough bread, specifically this kind of sourdough bread, and even if you used regular yeast to make your sourdough bread, it tastes different no matter where you are. So I have my sourdough starter, and it does taste and smell slightly different from inside to outside, but also from area to area. So he works about an hour away from where we live. If we only made sourdough starter if he only made it like at his desk, it's going to taste different than stuff from home.
Yeah.
That's why San Francisco sourdough is
like specifically San Francisco
sourdough.
Yeah, totally.
So my sourdough does not taste like San Francisco sourdough because we don't live in San Francisco.
Yeah.
But anywhere you live, it's going to taste slightly different. Yeah. Although if you start with a starter from a specific place or with a specific type of yeast, you will certainly still have echoes of that original
You're going to start
taste.
there, but it's going to slowly evolve with regard to time. Get that loaf of bread over there. Okay, so this was the last batch she made. Bread. It's bread.
Bread.
It turned into bread. So
it turned into bread. Who knew if you added flour and water together?
And neither of us are dead. So it.
And this is not my first. This is
no.
This
isn't her first sourdough. No. By any means.
I have been making sourdough for years. But I have only recently started up a sourdough starter again because sourdough starters can be a lot of work. But they also don't have to be, and everybody else is doing it, and I was like, oh my gosh, I miss making sourdough.
It's quarantine, so everybody's making bread, and it's going to take a lot of time, and it's probably not going to work out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So make some fucking bread.
Totally different.
Yeah. Actually, all of our bread is worked out, but then again, we also have made a lot of bread.
Yeah.
So the first one was a little glutinous.
And this one I didn't bake for as long as it
this one was a little underbaked. So there are so many like factors that contribute to what does and doesn't make like a quality sourdough or whatever the fuck. But like, whatever, you don't really have to worry about that. So okay, so this is what we're gonna do here with this video. We talked about setting up the starter, and then once she sort of has it mixed
so it
or
takes
whatever,
a few days to for the sourdough starter, especially if you're not starting where somebody gives you a sourdough starter.
If you're doing it fresh.
You may be able to find people on like your Nextdoor or like Craigslist or Facebook who are giving out sourdough starters. Those ones are already all the good bugs are in there and already pooping out good stuff. So you don't need to wait as long. But if you want to start from scratch, whether you were just throwing water and yeast into a receptacle and putting it into place, or whether you're starting with store-bought yeast, which you can do too, then you need to wait a few days. And there's a lot of ways that you can do this, so there really is not a right and wrong here. But what I personally do and what works for me is I generally feed my starter every 2 to 3 days in the current temperature that we have right now, which is about 65 to 70 degrees. The warmer it is, the faster the yeast is going to poop. And the more poop they're going to make, so the more you have to handle this. The colder it is, so like if you put it in the fridge, you don't need to do it quite as often. So if you put your starter in the fridge, you only need to feed it once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks.
As a generality, I'm going to recommend you don't put it in your fridge because it's a live and active thing, and your fridge has smells and flavors in it, right? Remember,
That
smells
is
and
true.
flavors affect everything.
You can't have fridge taste bread that tastes like your fridge.
Nobody wants something that tastes like a fridge. It's like plastic and gross.
So it took me about...
What are you feeding it?
Well, hold on.
Okay.
It took me about 2 to 3 days to get the yeast cultures looking in these jars the way that they should, as you saw earlier in this video. So that was good to go, and then I'm ready to make bread immediately afterwards.
And that's 2 to 3 days from your initial
yes
production of the starter, right?
Yes.
Like putting it in the jar, setting it outside, to right now we're filming this thing, we're about ready to make bread, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's 2 to 3 days for that, and then you just as a generality, right? You are going to kind of combine them, add your stuff, and then extract a little bit and make a new... You're not making a new starter, you're just basically like feeding it that way.
Yes.
Okay.
So what I am going to do
Just in case you've never made bread.
I am going to feed the starter. So whether or not you are baking bread with the starter or just feeding it, because you can feed it and not bake with it, it's not a requirement. Those steps are mostly the same, but slightly different. So we're going to go ahead and go through those steps of feeding the starter, and then I'll tell you what to do for that, and then we'll pick back up on the bread making.
Yeah, okay.
I need you to pause this.
You're going to follow us all the way through?
You good?
Oh. Okay. He's probably going to leave that in. It's going to be great.
No. No, I'm not.
We're back. So the sourdough starter has been... What?
The starters from outer space. It's not important. The starters.
The sourdough starter. I was like, what did you say? The sourdough starter has been sitting on the counter because I'm using 2. I let them mingle for about an hour or so, although it's been longer than an hour. That's fine. So I let them mingle for about an hour or 2. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to... put starter back into my 2 jars, one to go outside and one to go inside, and then I'm going to add water and flour to them to feed them, and then the remainder of what's in this bowl is going to become sourdough. So I'm going to use the half cup thing here. Now, you can do this in one of 2 ways, and you can just scoop the sourdough in and then add flour and add water, or you can add it all into here. And I usually just add it all into the one place because that makes my life so much easier. So we're going to start with adding water. So this water is at about 80 degrees. The thing about bread making and water temperature is that you don't want to have hot water and you don't want to have cold water because yeast like room temperature. Too hot and they die, too cold and they go dormant. So we're going to add a half a cup of water for each of my jars. And then we are going to stir that together with the sourdough starter that's already been in this bowl. And next, we're going to take some flour. You can weigh flour, but I don't want to have to get out that little scale. So what I do is I do the King Arthur flour method. I don't know if this is actually their method, but it's the first place I read it. You take your flour, it's in a thing, and then you turn it over and then back and over and then back until you can kind of feel like it's not like a big clunk going clunk, 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 clunk. To kind of loosen up the flour. It's similar to the effect of sifting flour. It makes it a little bit lighter. It's especially good to do this if you're using bread flour, which is finer, and that's what it is that I'm using. So, now that we've got our fluffy little flour, we're going to take 1/3 cup of flour-ish for each of the jars. And now we're going to stir that together. It's okay if there's clumps, but you do want it to be fairly mixed together and soupy.
Do you, at this point in time, do you need to worry about, like, how, like, mixing stuff builds up gluten and shit?
No, not yet. Because it's so liquidy, if you bring the camera over, you can see how liquidy this is. This is like like a soup.
Yeah.
So
But
that's
like less chunks, right?
yeah. Actually, no. You want it to be about this.
About that chunky?
Yep, about this
Okay.
chunky. So as it's chunky, it's gonna just kind of do its thing. So next, you're gonna scoop what your you can either use 2 bowls for this. I usually use 1. So next, you're gonna scoop the starter into the 2 jars. Mostly because I'm doing outside and inside. If you're only doing 1 jar, just scoop it into the 1 jar. And then the remainder of the flour in here is going to go and turn into bread. Mm-hmm. Or I'm sorry, not the remainder of the flour. The remainder of the starter in here is going to be turned into bread.
That makes sense.
So I have been keeping a pretty good amount of starter in here. So this is a 1/2 cup.
So that's a whole cup.
And now we're at a
So
cup and a
we're
half.
looking at about a cup and a half per jar.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
This is after a couple of days of feeding it and doing whatnot. You always want to make sure that you have some sourdough starter left after you've taken whatever it is that you need for bread, because you need the sourdough to reproduce. So I usually feed it a few times without taking
That's
any
a cup
away.
And a half each, yeah.
Yeah, I actually want a little bit more in there. We're going to go with 2 full cups.
Oh, we're going to do 2 cups each. What size mason jar are you using here? Quart jars?
These are quart jars.
Okay, so we're using quart jars, and you can see how full they are.
I like them because I can stick my hand in them.
Yeah, well, they're the wide mouth kind, which makes
Yeah.
life easier. I know that some people do the, like, Ziploc bag thing. Have you ever done that?
No.
I seem to remember as a child, we would get, like, a Ziploc bag with like a gloopy starter like that in it.
Oh. Nope.
I don't remember any of the details of what we did because, I was, like...
A child.
I mean, this was when I was in Sonoma still, so
So
this was, like,
now-
sub 6 years old.
We're left with about a cup of sourdough starter left in here. Just a little bit
Just
shy
wee
of a
bit.
cup.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let this sourdough starter in this bowl, in these jars, sit for a little bit until I can see that it's starting to bubble from the yeast and not just from, the air pockets from me stirring it. So once I can see that, it really depends on the temperature of your house. Once I can see that, it usually takes me about anywhere between 15 minutes and a half an hour to really see it. Then I'm going to take these guys out, put them where they belong, one outside and one in the window, and then it's time to start adding flour to this and turning it into dough.
Okay, so we will, as soon as this is all passed and we've, let's say we've added the flour and we've made the dough and all this kind of stuff, we'll catch back up for the rise and go over what ingredients we use in our sourdough.
That's right.
All right.
Welcome back! So I have mixed the flour and water to make a dough. As you can see, we have our jars ready to go outside. And if you look real close on the inside, you can see on the very top that they're starting to bubble. So that's why you keep them inside for a little bit after you fed them, to make sure that you did not murder that yeast. So this is the dough. So I add another cup of water to this, or I added another cup of water to this, and then I just added enough flour to make it so it's that like tacky, so it kind of comes off a little bit on your fingers. So you don't want to go any further than that with this first set of mixing the dough, because you want auto-lyse to happen. And what that is that's...
Autolysis?
I don't know how you say it. It's Autolyse. Or maybe I'm using the entirely wrong word. However, the method is the important thing. So after you mix the flour and the water together, I also added a little bit of a teaspoon of salt. Helps with the flavor. It also helps to keep the yeast kind of in check and do its thing, and perhaps other magic. I am not sure. I'm not a scientist. So once you've gotten the dough so that it's this sticky level, you want to get a damp towel. You can use cold water. That's what I usually use. And you want to put this into a warm spot.
Like a warm place in the house, yeah?
Yeah, a warm place in the house for the next 15, 20 minutes. You're looking for a total amount of time of about 25 minutes. And that's to help the auto-lyse, the gluten and stuff, work some magic, and the water to be incorporated. No, it's not actually for rising. It causes the bread, it causes the flour and the mixture to incorporate all of the water and for the gluten to start to activate. The yeast is starting to activate. So you want to go ahead and do that. So we're just going to leave that in a warm place. A warm place is not on top of your stove with your stove on. A warm place is not on top of your heater, but a warm place is somewhere where it's somewhere between 75 and 85 degrees.
On top of the fridge is often what people call, because fridges produce a lot of heat. So a lot of people say on top of the fridge.
I'm not really tall enough to put this stuff above the fridge.
And the top of our fridge is full of other fridge stuff.
So we usually, that is where open bags of chips and bananas die.
Because of this guy.
And those guys.
Yeah.
But mostly these guys.
Mostly that guy.
Because he's the
tallest
tall
one.
Yeah.
So we usually put it on the counter over by our space heater or near the oven if I'm still cooking.
Yeah.
So we will see you in about 20 minutes.
If Kasha would shut up with the drinking. Kasha, should you shut up with the drinking? Kasha doesn't love me. Okay, guys, we're back. Julie just pulled all the dough out of the thing.
Yep.
Now she's gonna knead it.
So when you pull the dough out after that initial waiting period, it's gonna stick to your hands. You're gonna be like, I have failed in bread making entirely. You may have entirely failed in bread making, but that's really what it's supposed to feel like at that step. So next we're gonna do a little bit of kneading. So as you can see, I've got like this long bit here. So you fold.
Called a dough tube.
Yeah, the doob, and then you fold like a letter.
I think
and
the
then
doob is a
you kind of want to take it, and I usually just kind of like flop it around like this. You actually don't want to do a whole lot of kneading on sourdough because it's going to make it like weirdly crumbly, and it's going to be altogether disappointing. So you can see I'm doing, again, this little foldy thing.
She's folding it into thirds.
Yep. And then I'm going to do it again.
Yeah.
And
now,
that's the next like 40 minutes of this video.
If I could do this, it would just be porno sax. Just like sexual kneading.
I cannot make that sound at all.
Really?
So
no, I heard it. Don't worry. We all heard it.
Waka waka, and I'm a little
waka.
I'm a little not happy with
waka.
that. So this is the fourth time that I'm turning it.
4 wakas.
And
is he the one that counts? Count Wakula?
No, I'm pretty sure the third waka is the last waka.
2 wakas.
So, as you can see, I'm doing this on a lightly floured surface. So now that we've done this for a few times, you can see the dough is no longer sticking to my hand when it's done, and it's starting. You can start to feel that it's like gaining elasticity. So
like
the
a
next
skin.
Yep. Like a creepy skin. You want a flour skin. So
you want your
next,
tube. You want your dough tube to have a skin.
You're gonna put it on the counter, and then you're just gonna like pull it to you, and then you're gonna do the same thing, and you're gonna pull it to you. But you can see what I'm doing is I'm rotating it ever so slightly.
You're rotating it on the quarter
each time I'm doing it, and I'm also doing it so it's picking up all of this flour, so I have less stuff to clean.
And it's making like a nice ball. Like look
yeah.
if you get in, we're gonna get it real tight here. Look at this. Look how tight this is. Yeah, it's so tight.
And then, so you can see the bottom, this is kind of what it's doing. It's giving a little bit of texture to the bottom, but it's also making it so that you don't see any of those seams from when I was folding it like a letter. And now I can feel that it's like pretty elasticy. So you know that you're done when you press it and then it springs right back. Boing.
It's sprung. Let's get real close. Let's see that sprung.
Oh,
guys.
that dough been sprung. What's up? You guys probably shouldn't watch this video. It's pretty awful. Okay.
I apologize for nothing. You're welcome.
So now there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. And I've done this in a variety of ways. So one way that's very popular is to lightly coat the dough ball in oil. And I actually don't really like doing that for sourdough. I will do that with other sweet yeasty breads, but not usually sourdough. So next, you've got your original bowl. It looks like this could be a pain in the ass to clean. We're going to make that worse by taking a sprinkle of flour, and we're just going to kind of line this guy.
You apply flour directly to the bowl.
In some flour. You can see, because there's moisture, there's flour in here. There's a little bit of extra. Like that. You don't want a whole lot. You're just lightly flouring it. And now you plop this baby in there. You say, good night, moon. Good night, moon? Yeah. go the fuck to sleep.
Yeah, there you go.
And then
Fuck
you
good night
cover
minutes.
this
Go the
with
fuck to
your
sleep.
still damp towel. So now this is going to go into a warm place again. And this is going to rise for anywhere between 8 and 16 hours. So I'm doing this in the evening, and this is going to rise overnight. No, I do not put it in the fridge. No, I am not going to sleep with it. That would be super gross. I just washed our sheets. And
Yeah, some people do sleep with it.
that's super weird.
Did we read that online about that guy who was like sleeping on the couch because his wife was
I think
sleeping
that
with
was
the
just
bread
like
or something?
Joke, but I'm not really
I don't
sure.
know. Yeah.
So our house is a little bit colder because we live in a 120-year-old cabin in the woods.
Yeah.
So I usually end up letting this rise for about 14 hours. So this is not a one-day bread thing because you got some time. And in the meantime, you want to make sure that your towel stays damp. So if you are letting it rise overnight, before you go to bed, check to make sure that your towel is damp. And then in the morning when you get up, check to make sure your towel is damp. If it's not damp, put some water on it. But take it off of the bowl first.
Apply directly to water. Yeah.
Yeah. And if it's not, and if it is damp, kudos.
Yeah.
Leave it.
Okay, so camera 2.
All right, guys. So this is what we're gonna do. Mostly because it's Wednesday and I wanted to get a video out today, and I'm lazy and I don't want to have to think about stuff tomorrow because I have tomorrow things I have to deal with. So this video is gonna end here.
Part 1.
Sort of. So the plan is going to be that after this is done, right, we're going to do on Instagram, what you call them, stories. We're going to talk about the baking, and we're going to test the bread. Once it's done baking and whatever the fuck.
There's still a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I guess. There's baking. We're just going to do them in tiny Instagram stories. And the reason why is now you have to follow me on Instagram.
Or maybe I talk him into doing both.
We'll see what happens. I'm real lazy.
See.
So, all right. Either way, I've been John Norgrove. This has been Wife. Those are some dogs. And in general, you should like, comment, share, and subscribe. So, yeah, do that shit, I guess.
That's right.
All right. Bye.
Bye.